Welcome back, everyone, to American Government and Politics at Simmons College. And I have received the quizzes from those of you who have submitted them. If you haven't submitted them, try to get them into me, and you'll lose some points for being late, but I don't want anybody to make a bad grade in this class, but I really, really appreciate those of you who got them on time. You're going to get full credit or be graded on a scale of full credit for those quizzes. That being said, it's been a long time since we talked, and that's partially my fault, but I'm going to get us back on schedule and back following the timeline of the supplement to the syllabus that's there on Canvas. And if you have any questions about that timeline, please don't hesitate to contact me. I have heard from a couple of you, in particular last week when I failed to properly post the quiz, but I gave you some extra time to complete it. But I still apologize for the way that timeline worked out and that I had incorrectly posted that. But now that it's been posted and I gave you until this past Sunday to complete it, thank those of you who did that. Moving on to the content of the syllabus. It's time to talk about different forms of government. We've talked a little bit so far in this class about the type of government we have here in the United States. And it is a republic. We have a republican form of government. Now, that is not to be confused with the name of the modern Republican Party. There are many types of government, and the two major parties in the United States today do draw their names from a couple of those types, so it gets a little confusing. But it's not too hard once you get the hang of it. Once you get the hang of the kind of the lingo and jargon of government and politics. That being said, the United States is a republic. What does that mean? It means we are a government where the key decisions are made by people who have been elected to make those decisions. So is it a true democracy? No. A pure and true democracy is a government in which all of the people get to make all of the decisions. There are a lot of reasons why we don't have that type of government. For one, it's impractical. There are over 300 million people in the United States today. If we all had equal say in all decisions, we would never get any decisions made. But it's a little deeper than that, as you may have guessed. It's rooted in aristocracy. It's rooted in a desire of those who have inherent and historical power to maintain that power. When this country was founded, it was founded by people who had a deep-seated and honest, as far as they knew, in their minds, an honest belief in representative government, meaning, okay, it's impractical for all the people to make all the decisions, but we should give the voters, give the people some right to vote, and give the voters some ability to elect decision makers. As we discussed earlier in the semester, that led to the House of Representatives, where every state has a number of delegates based on their population, and the United States Senate, where every state gets 2 votes. It also led to an election process to choose the President of the United States. It's a weird process, but it's still a process that elects the President based on votes. As we've also touched a little bit on this semester, and we're going to get into more the next week or two, it's not a purely democratic process. It's not even a purely representative process. If it were representative from day one, from the beginning of the United States, and even more so from the time when the Constitution was enacted into law, then everybody would have some say. Does everybody have some say? Does everybody get to vote? No. Who doesn't get to vote? In the United States today, Citizens get to vote. Citizens over 18 or years of age, 18 or older. Does everyone 18 or older get to vote? No. People with felony convictions, they don't get to vote unless they've had their rights restored. And we are living right now in the middle of a movement in this country to restore the voting rights of felons. Is that something that President Donald Trump and Congress can do? No. Voting rights and access to the polls, access to voting places, and the ability to vote, not the right to vote, but the ability to vote, are a state-by-state process. As are some things related to the right to vote. So in Kentucky, for example, it's been several years now. It's been quite a few years since Kentucky's General Assembly, the Kentucky State Legislature in Frankfort, voted to allow nonviolent felons to restore their voting rights. It's not that easy, though. First of all, what is a nonviolent felony? Well, some are obvious. A lot of them have to do with drug possession. In Kentucky, if you have 3 or more DUIs, that's a felony. That's a nonviolent felony. That's just a couple of examples. There are many others. A lot of them have to do with white-collar crimes like identity theft or embezzling money and those kind of things. Those are non-violent felonies. Can they just vote right away? No. There's a restoration process to restore votes. And that process is highly controversial. But it's better now than it was 20 years ago, and it's a whole lot better now than it was 100 years ago or more, because some people with felony convictions in Kentucky now have a right to vote. And that's true for most states. Most states are going through this process right now. As I said, we're living through a time period right now where people with felony records are being able to restore their right to vote. But it's a very slow, gradual process. Should those people have ever lost their right to vote? That's a controversial question. Why? Because the laws that do and don't constitute felonies are largely discriminatory. They're largely discriminatory. Whether or not someone is charged with a felony conviction, and convicted either or a misdemeanor. Felony conviction, misdemeanor conviction often depends upon your legal representation. How good is your lawyer? How good, how good is the lawyer at bringing down those charges? Not everybody gets to vote in this country. And even if you have a right to vote, you have no felony conviction, or you've had your felony record expunged, you're 18 years or older, you are a natural-born citizen, which is, there's more citizens, millions more, than those of us who were born in this country. But let's just say, to make it simple, you're a natural-born citizen, no felony record. Can you vote? Maybe. It's a question of access to the polls. Polls meaning the polling places, the places you physically go to vote. Let's set aside this year for a minute, because this year is a very different year where we don't have as many polling places as we have in the past, and also we have the option of mailing in early votes to avoid the big crowds because of the COVID-19 pandemic. But in years past, has everybody had access to the polling places? The answer is no. Of course, it was not until the 1860s. So this country, the Constitution, had been in existence and enacted for the better part of a century. And not until the 1860s did black men gain the right to vote in the South. Why am I saying black men? Because it wasn't until the 1920s that women, regardless of race, that women gained the right to vote. This country's history has been mostly a history of white men voting on who's going to represent the whole country in Congress and the White House. I'm not saying that's a good thing. In fact, it's not a good thing. We have a history of underrepresentation at our polling places, of underrepresentation in government. You may have heard the term underrepresented minority. What does that mean? Well, it means a group of people who make up the population but are not equally represented in government. It was about the year 2000, I believe, until about the year 2016, there wasn't a single black woman in Kentucky's state legislature. And currently, my state representative, the district where I live, Representative Attica Scott, is a black woman in Kentucky's state House of Representatives. But it was the better part of 2 decades in which Kentucky did not have a black woman, despite the fact that there were a whole lot of black women living in Kentucky. This brings up a larger question. Can someone who does not look like you, does not think exactly like you, does not have your gender, your ethnicity, your religion, your race, your background, your economic background, can that person vote in your best interest? And the answer is sure. Sure they can, but will they? That's the better question. Will that person who's not like you, who doesn't have the same background as you, will that person vote in your best interest? That's a question that the founders of this country did not really try to tackle. They have some writings about how they thought about that in some ways, about representative government, but they really never, the founders of this country never really tackled the question of, okay, we have a lot of black women living in this country, but women can't vote. And in the southern states, black people can't vote. So are those black women being represented? That wasn't a concern for the founders of this country. And so, the next couple of lectures, I'm going to tackle the issue of how we can achieve a more representative government and how this country has tried, with some success and some failure, to do so. But let me leave you with this. We are a country where we have a theoretical right to elect representatives in government to make decisions on our behalf. But have those people historically made decisions that look to the benefit of underrepresented minorities? No. That second part is really my opinion, but it's not a very controversial opinion. I mean, it is not much of a leap at all. Not much of a logical leap to say that this country has a history of representing the interests of the majority race and of the people who have money to finance political elections. Now, put a pin in that, and we'll talk next week. We'll talk later this week. We'll talk tomorrow, actually. Tomorrow I'll have another video up. And in the meantime, remember that early in-person voting has started in Kentucky. Some of you may have had your mail-in ballots already and mailed those in. That's great. as a professor at Simmons College, I'm not going to tell you how to vote or how you should vote. I'm not going to tell you how I vote. But I must encourage you to vote. To vote, vote, vote. Vote for yourselves, vote for your communities, vote for the city, the Commonwealth of Kentucky, and for this country. But really, first and foremost, vote for yourselves, your families, and your community. Vote, vote, vote. If you don't like what's happening in this country today, vote. If you don't like what's happening in Louisville, Kentucky today, vote. If you don't like the outcome of the indictments or lack thereof related to the murder of Breonna Taylor, vote. If you want people on the Supreme Court of the United States who feel the way you feel, vote. Whether you feel like me or whether you feel the opposite of me, please vote. Vote early if you can, but just vote. And I will talk to y'all tomorrow. I have another lecture video up. In the meantime, I'll be grading your quizzes. Thank you all who've gotten them in. And don't forget to comment on this video that you watched it. That's how you get your attendance grade for the class. And if you have comments or thoughts or questions, that's how you get your participation grade for this class. Thank you all so much. Have a good Tuesday into Wednesday, and I'll talk to y'all soon.